This is TWiT.
I think any Apple employees that bought microphones for their fine Zoom setup can now rest easy. They're going back to work. According to Bloomberg, Apple has told employees you must work at least 3 days a week starting Labor Day or the day after, September 5th. That's appropriate.
Come back, but don't wear white pants.
Yeah, yes. No white belts, no white pants. It's time to go to dark pants. So at least 3 days a week. Here's the thing that's really annoying. They specify the days. So you'll have to work Tuesdays, Thursdays, and a third day to be determined by your team director, which is like, what? Well, what about Wednesday? Can we do Wednesday so I have a long weekend? No, you're going to do Friday and like it. How annoying!
I do think I do see Wednesday. I'm going to guess that Wednesday will be almost as busy as Tuesday and Thursday because everyone's going to go
Wednesday. Please,
yeah, we're going to put it. Everyone's going to put. I think everyone's going to choose Wednesday if they're for a third day.
But
Not everyone, but
your boss
everybody
gets to choose it. That's the problem.
Yeah, well, but your boss still has to put up with you.
Is this kind of retro? That's
like,
true. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Is this kind of retro? Is this old fashioned? I know companies like Twitter and I can't remember what Google's policy is, but a lot of companies are saying never come back.
I think that there's a corporate culture thing that I've talked to a couple executives at some. It's not this company, but other companies, and there is a concern that there's a certain corporate culture of having everyone there. That they are concerned that people can get their work done, but at some point they're looking at multiple year erosion of company culture and how we approach things, and so I think that's one of the concerns that they have is allowing it to just keep going down that path. It also means that by saying everyone's got to be there Tuesday and Thursday, it means that if you want to do something for lunch for the employees, something during the break or the middle of the day, because really in most of these companies, being in the office means that you have to be available for meetings between, I think it's like usually 10 and 4 or 9:30 and 4:30 or something like that. It's not really like they all get there at crack of dawn or whatever. And a lot of people come in early or they leave late, but they have to be there in that window. So that gives the company a window to, if they want to do an all hands at 2:00, they know that people will be there. Or if they want to do some kind of outdoor party or something, they can plan around people are actually going to be at the event. So I think that's probably why they're standardizing on a couple days. And then again, I think Wednesday would probably pretty busy and I think it'll be really interesting to see. A lot of employees have kind of they've burrowed in. They've turned their garages into offices. They've turned their guest room into offices. They've moved to Tahoe. They've done a lot of things. And I think that's going to be I think Apple pulled away partially because of COVID in the spring, but also partially because a lot of people leaving pretty quickly. And I think they need to stop and think about this for a minute. And so I think it'll be interesting to see now that they're turning back on again, what happens again.
A lot of it also has to do with the fact that they have all this real estate that they've invested in tremendous amounts of capital on the pretext that we are going to house these many employees on an actual campus. Some of the deals that they got with the communities that they built in are contingent on we will be bringing X number of employees into your town, and they will be probably going out to lunch and spending money and generating tax revenue while they're there. But the other sickening aspect of it is that managers want employees inside the office because it's easier to conduct surveillance on them inside the office. Otherwise, you have to basically force them to turn their workspace at home into a surveillance state through software, through like webcams that can't be covered up, microphones that can't be covered up. I know that they're using this kind of software inside the office as well, but this is becoming the pretext that a lot of different management structures are using to basically be able to look at metrics and saying, hey, on Tuesday afternoons, consistently from 2 to 3, you're only typing 40% of the time, and 30% of the time you're not even looking at the screen. What's up with that? That's like stealing from the company. So this is part of the ongoing labor battle in the tech sphere, no less than any place else.
I think that that may happen in some companies. I don't think that Apple's too worried about micromanaging people's time. Just because there's a lot to do as an Apple employee. That's the impression I get, at least, is there's a lot to get done. Yeah. And you show up pretty quickly as someone who isn't getting it done if you don't. And
so why make them come back?
Again, I think
I'm sorry.
I think it's a corporate culture. I think it's mostly a corporate culture concern, that there is a certain way of that they, and again, the ability, they want people to be mixing. And
we already saw that letter from employees the last time Apple proposed this. Jason, is it retro to say you got to come to the office to get a job? Now, I think depends on the job, obviously. We make our, some of our talent has to come in, our staff.
Yeah, I mean, the blanket statement is the problem, right? But I do think, I think Apple has a corporate culture of people being in seats. I think it stems from Steve Jobs. There's a story my friend James Thompson tells. He worked on the Finder team back in the early days of OS X, and he was in Ireland at Apple's Cork offices. And Steve Jobs basically found out that one of the Finder engineers was in Ireland and said he needs to move here or he is out. And James was like, goodbye. And I think that Steve Jobs, and I had managers like this too, they want to see butts in seats. They believe in this. And I don't want to call it a myth, but I think the serendipity of bumping into people at the coffee pot and having a brilliant conversation or having some amazing conversation in a meeting somewhere, it does happen. It does happen. But I think that it's overstated and it's used as an excuse by a lot of managers because they just want to see their people and observe them. And while Andy talks about like the timed surveillance that some companies are doing with remote workers, I think it's a softer kind of observation, like if I see you, I know you're present in the office and not messing around at home. The problem is the truth with a lot of these knowledge workers is you can measure their success or failure at their job, and it doesn't have to equate to how long they sat in your office to do it. And Apple culturally has been reluctant to embrace that for some groups. Again, there's some groups that it probably doesn't make sense for them to be remote. But I've also worked in remote work groups, and it's been great. And my overarching feeling about Apple is that I really wish Apple would do a rethink about what jobs and groups need to be present, how often they need to be present, and what jobs don't need to be present. Because while Andy's right, they've invested a lot in real estate, they also rent a lot of office space in the South Bay. They could probably afford to take some of their jobs virtual. And you know what? The cost of living in the South Bay is extremely high, and there is a talent loss that will happen.
That's a big part of the problem, isn't it?
From people who can't afford to, or for lifestyle reasons, for starting a family or whatever, do not want to have to commute to Cupertino, a suburb that doesn't have public transportation, by the way, every day. So I think the brain drain, if I were an Apple executive, I would be most concerned that our policies were so strict that we're going to have a brain drain, we're going to lose people to remote work elsewhere, and that we need to have a strategy. And I think the reality is that they're going to start making exceptions for great employees that they want to retain. And instead of doing that remote policy all at once, they're just going to essentially do it over time by letting people leave and keep their jobs because they can't afford to lose them.
And I think that rethinking the open office for a lot of these companies, and some of them are, obviously because of COVID, it doesn't work at all, but the employees hated it before that.
Weirdly, Apple dropped their mask mandates a few weeks ago in the public areas.
Yeah, but the main thing, the problem with the public areas is not COVID. It's really the fact that you can't have a conversation. You can't think straight. You can't. Everyone's talking to you all the time, and they say, well, it's really, managers were talking about it. There was someone who said, as a manager, I just love being able to walk over and talk to an engineer. And I'm like, as someone who used to be an engineer, an engineer, I was like, I hate that. Like that is like, I was in the middle of trying to figure something out, and now you interrupted it, and your 5-minute question has now cost me an hour of figuring out where I was again. And so the thing is that it is, I do think that there's serendipity. I do think that these big companies, there are things you talk about at lunch that you run into someone. And the problem is, like, we've replaced a lot of that in office hours because we're open. We have a thing called after hours where people are there 21 hours a day. And we have a lot of that serendipity. People just come on and start talking about something, start showing something, everything else. But you can't do that at Apple because everything's top secret. Right. So you can't just have a video feed that people can just hang out in. And so I think that's one of the challenges is it does, reduce some of that. And I do think that there is serendipity at some of these companies that you would lose out on. But I think that there's a lot of valid reasons. And again, the most valid reason is that, wow, is it expensive in the South Bay to live? And it just... put so much pressure on people who are there because you buy a house and now you have a mortgage of, $5,000. I mean, when you're listening to this, a mortgage in San Jose or in Cupertino is $3,000 to $6,000 for not a great house. $3,000 to $6,000 a month for not.
You may be underselling it. In fact,
no. It can be much closer to $10,000 a month that you're paying for a rundown house. Like
let's just take a look.
That are not rundown are like 10 to 20,000.
Here's a nice. Here's a beautiful ranch style home in Cupertino, 3-bed, 2-bath, 1,200 square feet, $1.9 million.
And what's the payment on it?
Let's just go down a little bit on Zillow. The Zestimate. Oh, that's the Zestimate. Where's the monthly cost? $10,000.
$10,000
a month. That's based on your mortgage and property taxes and home insurance.
So it's just super expensive, and it puts so much pressure on the employees because it's not just does their salary. I mean, it means that their salaries are really high for Apple, but it also means that if I lose this job, I lose my house. I have to do can I find another job that's going to pay the same number that when you have to start making $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 a year, in the rest of the country, that's a pretty rarefied space,
We think about Apple and we think about like the creative people who are doing like, oh, we're doing the hardware or we're, or I'm programming the operating system. And although I would say that some of those jobs probably can be remote too, I think James could have built the Finder from Ireland just fine. And collaboration tools have gotten a lot better in the last 20 years. We've learned that we can do a lot of things remotely. We put the lie to this story that people couldn't work remotely. And now everybody's trying to claw it back. But let's just not forget, there are lots of jobs at Apple that are not those jobs. There are lots of jobs at Apple that are in Cupertino or Sunnyvale or San Jose because they've always been there. And because it's corporate culture for them to be there. And that's my problem with this blanket announcement by Tim Cook and Apple about this, is that I really wish they had done a little more soul searching about what jobs needed to be present and what didn't. But like I said, I think in the end, it's not going to matter because they're going to have a great person that they want to keep or hire, and they're not going to want to live in Cupertino or surroundings, and they're going to make an exception, and that's going to keep happening until they have some dispersed groups regardless. But it's wasteful. It's wasteful for a lot of those groups to put all that time and effort and money into being present for something that is really an online collaboration, remote job anyway.
And we, there's a lot of pretty important people that left when Apple did the first pass at this. These were product managers. These were engineering managers that were like, I don't want to come back. And I live in Tahoe and I'm going to stay here, kind of thing. And they, the problem for Apple is that, a lot of times or for all these companies is that the golden handcuffs of getting all that stock eventually become golden wings. And they don't really need to be here anymore. Like it's nice to keep on getting those stock options, but they've been getting them for 20 years and they have enough to live on, and they can start making, wider decisions. And I think that it is really, there was a product, not at Apple, somewhere else, that there were two people that could have become product managers for it. And one person would have taken it one direction. Another person would have basically cut it to the bone. And the person who got a job cut that product to the bone. And that product was Google Hangouts. Boy, did they miss out a couple years ago when the COVID hit, and it was just a decision by one person. So when you start changing one person out, and that's going to now run the idea behind that, it can change the entire trajectory of a product line.
It says corporate employees. I'm not sure what that means.
Where retail is different, right?
Okay.
For one.
You don't have to go to Cupertino if you work at
somebody who's in the
Union Square
Apple campus. Yeah. Okay.
And they have some contractors too. There are a bunch. Okay. Apple still does, which I still find bizarre, but Apple still does work with contractors as well, where there are people who are doing support and other things, even things that are in like contractor in Sunnyvale. I know somebody who's a contractor working 100% for Apple, but for a contracting company, and their offices are just across the street in Sunnyvale, but they're technically not an Apple employee, which is a game that you would expect a company like Apple maybe not to play because they've got all the money. Why are they doing that? But that, again, it's a corporate culture thing. So this is all rolled in there. But I'll tell you, I mean, I ran a disparate, dispersed geographically office at Macworld, and the bottom line was like, I wanted the best writers I could find, and if the best writer is in Massachusetts and we're in San Francisco, am I going to hire somebody worse because I want to look at them as they have their headphones on in the open office writing stories instead of having them in our Slack or our Campfire back in the day or whatever
that's
it was?
writers. I mean, writing is a very solitary.
It is, but I mean, they have the App Store editorial group at Apple is basically a geographically dispersed group, and yet they really want to hire people and have them sit in an office in Cupertino.
That's silly.
That's the challenge here. Is there's no way to do this because there's always going to be an exception that is like, but they have to be there to design the chips. It's like, okay, that I totally get it.
Hardware
That's
has
fine.
to be there. Sure.
Yeah, it's just, and this isn't just Apple. All these corporations have basically are trying to hide or run away from the idea that a lot of the arguments against remote work have been proven wrong. And that's the interesting push and pull of the next 5 or 10 years is that a lot of people have realized that it's a lie. And, companies that get on that train and realize that they can get valuable people and maybe even save some money, but get valuable people and pay them remotely and not have real estate in a downtown somewhere that makes them feel good about their company, but doesn't actually do anything. They're going to get people who are more talented who want to work remotely, and they will benefit.
Here are companies, just examples of companies that are permanent remote work, like for anybody: 3M, Airbnb, Atlassian. I'm skipping some of them I don't know of. Coinbase. Well, there probably isn't anybody there left anyway.
And I think that,
Dropbox, HubSpot, LogMeIn, Lyft, Meta, Okta, Quora, Twitter, Reddit. I mean.
Well, I have a friend who works at Dropbox who moved back to North Carolina from the Bay Area.
Well, and I thought the Dropbox took one of the most interesting ways of doing it. Say, hey, the offices are here. We've got services at the offices. We've got the little micro kitchens and places for you to have conference calls and so on and so forth. If you need somewhere to go, come on in. We're happy to have you.
They're calling it Dropbox Studios.
Yeah, I thought it was great.
That's
such
brilliant.
a really that's the future.
Fresh baked
we're going to give you a place
in the lobby, and people will come.
Yeah. There are people who live in a small house,
right?
who live in a busy house, who live.
That's the real
who don't
point.
have the bandwidth.
It varies.
You need to have somewhere for them to go.
Some people like to be around other people,
for sure.
Some people don't. I think in the tech sphere, there is a preponderance of introverts and people who, if you're coding or writing, you probably do want it. I know we had an open office in the last studio. Everybody hated it. It was.
They
you liked
put
it, John?
their headphones on.
I thought it was a great idea, but they did not. They did not like it.